The wind screamed across the frozen wasteland of Arctis Prime. Ice crystals flew through the air like tiny knives, cutting through anything exposed to the storm. The temperature had dropped to -60 degrees, cold enough to freeze blood in minutes. This was the worst blizzard Jake Morrison had seen in 5 years of living on this cursed moon. Jake sat in his small shelter, listening to the howl of the wind outside. The walls shook with each gust, but the structure held firm. He had built it to last, reinforced it with materials from the abandoned mining colony nearby. This place was his home now, his prison, his escape from a past he wanted to forget. The fire in the heating unit crackled quietly. Jake held a cup of hot coffee, watching the flames dance behind the protective glass. He was 44 years old. Though he felt much older, his face was weathered and lined, his dark hair showing streaks of gray. A thick beard covered his jaw. His eyes were hard, the kind of eyes that had seen too much death. He lived alone by choice. The nearest settlement was 300 miles away, and that was exactly how Jake wanted it. No visitors, no questions, no one to remind him of who he used to be. The motion sensor beeped. Jake froze, his cup halfway to his lips. The sensor was positioned 50 yards from his door. Nothing should be moving out there in this storm. Nothing alive, anyway. He set down his cup and moved to the security screen mounted on the wall. The display showed nothing but white. The blizzard was too thick to see through. But the sensor did not lie. Something was out there, moving toward his shelter. Jake grabbed his rifle from the wall mount. His hands moved with practiced ease, checking the weapon, making sure it was loaded and ready. Years of training never left a person, no matter how hard they tried to forget. The sensor beeped again. Closer now. Through the howling wind, Jake heard a new sound. A thud against his door. Then another. Someone was pounding on the metal, desperate to get inside. Jake stood in front of the door, rifle raised, finger near the trigger. His heart pounded in his chest. He had not opened his door to another person in 3 years. The last time had ended badly. He had sworn never again. But the pounding continued, weaker now. Whoever was out there was dying. The storm would kill them in minutes if they stayed outside. Jake cursed under his breath. He lowered the rifle slightly but did not put it down. His hand hovered over the door controls. Every instinct told him to walk away, to let the storm take whoever was foolish enough to be out in it. The pounding stopped. Something inside Jake broke. He slammed his fist against the door controls. The heavy metal door slid open with a hiss, and the storm rushed inside. Wind and ice filled the room, dropping the temperature instantly. A figure collapsed through the doorway, falling onto the floor. Jake grabbed them and dragged them inside, then hit the controls to close the door. The metal slammed shut, sealing out the deadly cold. Jake looked down at what he had saved. It was not human. The figure on his floor was tall, nearly 7 feet even while lying down. The skin was blue, a deep azure color that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. The creature wore torn clothing that was completely wrong for this climate. Thin fabric that might work on a warm planet but was useless here. 4-fingered hands were turning black from frostbite. The face was similar to human but different. Larger eyes, no nose to speak of, and a wider mouth. The creature was female, Jake thought, based on the body structure. He knew what she was. Valerian, one of the advanced races that made up the Galactic Coalition. They were scientists, diplomats, traders. They were not warriors, and they definitely did not belong on frozen death traps like Arctis Prime. Jake knelt beside her, checking for signs of life. Her chest moved slightly, still breathing, but barely. Her skin was ice cold to the touch. He moved quickly, pulling emergency blankets from his storage locker. He wrapped her in 3 layers of thermal material, then carried her closer to the fire. Her body was surprisingly light for her size. Valerians had hollow bones, he remembered, an adaptation for their low-gravity home world. Jake prepared hot liquid, a simple broth made from dried rations. He forced some between her lips, watching her throat move as she swallowed reflexively. Good. Her body was still fighting. For the next hour, Jake worked to warm her up slowly. Too fast would cause shock. He added more blankets, adjusted the heating unit, and gave her small amounts of liquid every few minutes. Her color began to improve, the blue of her skin becoming brighter instead of the dull gray it had been. She started to move. Her 4 fingers twitched. Her large eyes moved beneath their lids. She was waking up. Jake sat back, picking up his rifle again. He did not point it at her, but he kept it close. Trust was not something he gave freely anymore. The alien woman's eyes opened slowly. They were dark, almost black, and much larger than human eyes. She blinked several times, trying to focus. Her gaze moved around the room, taking in the small space, the bare walls, the few pieces of equipment Jake owned. Then her eyes found Jake's face. Her reaction was immediate and violent. The Valerian woman gasped and tried to scramble backward, away from him. Her movements were weak and uncoordinated, but the fear in her eyes was real and powerful. She pressed herself against the far wall, as far from Jake as she could get in the small space. Her mouth opened and closed several times before words came out. When she finally spoke, her voice was rough and cracked from the cold, but the accent was clear. She was speaking human standard language, the common tongue used across the galaxy. "You," she whispered. "I know you. I know your face." Jake said nothing. He watched her carefully, rifle still in his hands. "You are him," she continued, her voice growing stronger with horror. "You are the Phantom of Kepler Station." Jake felt his jaw tighten. His hands gripped the rifle harder. That name, that cursed damned name he had traveled across the galaxy to escape. "That is not who I am anymore," Jake said quietly. "But it is who you were," the alien woman said. Her eyes were wide with fear. "Every child in the Valerian systems knows the stories. The human who killed 200 Kraith soldiers alone. The ghost who turned a space station into a graveyard. They say you are the most dangerous human alive." "They are wrong," Jake said. "I am just a man who wants to be left alone." "The Kraith have a bounty on your head," she said. 10 million credits. Dead or alive, though they prefer dead." "I know." "Then why did you save me? You should have let me die out there. Now I know where you are. I could tell them." Jake looked at her for a long moment. Then he set the rifle down beside him, though still within easy reach. "You could," he agreed. "But you will not, because if you were the kind of person who would do that, you would not be running from them yourself." The alien woman stared at him. Slowly, some of the fear left her eyes. She pulled the thermal blankets tighter around herself. "My name is Sarah," she said finally. "I am a xenobiologist. I discovered something I should not have. Now the Kraith want me dead." Jake nodded slowly. He understood that feeling all too well. "The storm will pass by morning," he said. "When it does, you leave. Go far from here and forget you ever saw me." Sarah looked like she wanted to argue, but then she glanced at Jake's face and thought better of it. She nodded. Outside, the wind continued to howl. The blizzard showed no signs of stopping, and neither Jake nor Sarah knew that in the morning they would face something far more dangerous than any storm. The Kraith hunters were already here. Sarah could not stop looking at the human across from her. Jake Morrison sat by the fire, his face half in shadow, cleaning his rifle with calm, steady movements. His hands were scarred and rough, the hands of someone who had worked hard and fought harder. She had heard the stories since she was young. Every species in the Galactic Coalition knew about Kepler Station. It had become a legend, a warning, a ghost story that parents told their children, the story of what happened when you made humanity angry. 7 years ago, Kepler Station had been a research facility studying wormhole technology. It was a joint project between 12 different species, all working together to unlock faster travel across the galaxy. 300 people lived and worked on that station. Only 12 of them were human. The Kraith Dominion attacked without warning. They wanted the wormhole research for themselves, to use it as a weapon. They sent 300 soldiers, expecting an easy victory. Scientists were not fighters. The station had minimal security. It should have been simple. They were wrong. Sarah remembered when the news reached her home world. At first, the reports were confusing. Kepler Station had gone dark during the attack. No communications came out. The Coalition sent rescue ships, but they were 3 days away. Everyone assumed the worst. When the rescue ships finally arrived, they found a scene from a nightmare. 200 Kraith soldiers were dead. Some had been crushed when gravity plating reversed in corridors, slamming them into ceilings at high speed. Others had been caught when airlocks suddenly opened, sucking them into space. Some had died when life support systems pumped toxic gas into sealed rooms. A few had been killed by the station's own defense systems, reprogrammed to hunt them like prey. The station itself was still functioning, running on complex automated sequences that the engineers could not shut down for weeks. Every system had been turned into a weapon. Every corridor had become a death trap. It was brilliant and terrifying in equal measure. The survivors, mostly the scientists and families who had been locked in safe rooms, spoke of a figure moving through the darkness. A human who seemed to be everywhere at once, who knew every vent, every access tunnel, every weakness in the station's design. They called him the Phantom. Security footage showed glimpses, a shadow moving past a camera, a figure in the distance, gone before anyone could focus. Jake Morrison, former military consultant, had spent 3 days turning Kepler Station into a graveyard for the Kraith invaders. The Kraith Dominion was humiliated. They had lost 2/3 of their attack force to a single human. They placed a bounty on the Phantom's head. 10 million credits, the largest bounty in the galaxy. But Jake Morrison had disappeared. The Coalition wanted to give him medals. The Kraith wanted his head. He wanted neither. He had simply vanished into the vast emptiness of space. Until now. Sarah pulled the blankets tighter around herself. Her body was still cold, though the feeling was returning to her fingers and toes. The pain of warming up was sharp, but bearable. "Why did you do it?" she asked suddenly. Jake looked up from his rifle. His eyes were dark and unreadable. "Do what?" "At Kepler Station. Why did you fight? You could have hidden with the others." "You could have survived without killing anyone." Jake was quiet for a long moment. He set down the rifle and stared into the fire. "I was in the security office when they attacked," he said finally. His voice was flat, empty of emotion. "I saw everything on the monitors. The Kraith came in shooting. They did not ask for surrender. They did not take prisoners. They just killed." He paused, his jaw tight. "I watched them execute a family in Corridor 7. A researcher, his wife, their 2 children. The kids were 5 and 7 years old. The soldiers laughed while they did it." Sarah felt sick. She knew the Kraith were brutal, but hearing it described this way made it real in a way reports never did. "I realized the Coalition ships would not arrive in time," Jake continued. "I realized everyone on that station was going to die unless someone did something. So I did something. You killed 200 soldiers. I made them pay for every life they took. I made them afraid. I turned their invasion into a nightmare they could not wake up from." "And now you hide here," Sarah said, "alone on a frozen moon, trying to forget." "I am not trying to forget," Jake said sharply. "I remember every single moment, every trap I set, every soldier who died. I remember all of it. I came here because I do not want to be that person again." Sarah studied him carefully. This man was a legend across the galaxy, feared by enemies and celebrated by allies. But looking at him now, she saw only someone who was tired. someone who had done terrible things for good reasons and could not forgive himself. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "I did not mean to bring your past back to you. It is not your fault. The past has a way of finding us, no matter how far we run." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind outside. The storm was still raging, showing no signs of stopping. Sarah's mind wandered to her own problems, the Kraith hunters who were chasing her, the evidence she carried about their war crimes, the people who were counting on her to survive and bring that evidence to the Coalition. "Can I ask what you discovered?" Jake said. Sarah hesitated, but she had already involved him by coming here. He deserved to know. "I am a xenobiologist," she began. "I study alien life forms. 6 months ago, I was hired to examine some biological samples from a Kraith military facility. They said it was routine work, cataloging native species from planets they were surveying." She pulled out a small data chip from inside her clothing. It was sealed in a waterproof case. "What I found was not native species. It was evidence of biological weapons testing. The Kraith have been experimenting on captured populations from their conquered worlds. Men, women, children, thousands of them. They are trying to create a plague that only affects specific species." Jake's expression darkened. "I copied everything I could before they realized what I had found. I barely escaped with my life. They have been hunting me for 3 weeks now. I thought I could lose them in this storm, but they followed me here." "They are still out there," Jake said. It was not a question. "Yes. When the storm clears, they will come for me. I am sorry. I did not know anyone lived here. I just needed shelter." Jake stood up and walked to his equipment locker. He began pulling out items, weapons, sensors, other gear that Sarah did not recognize. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Preparing. If the Kraith are out there, they will attack at dawn. They will want the advantage of daylight to search. You do not have to help me. Give me a weapon and I will lead them away from here. You can stay hidden." Jake looked at her like she was insane. "They saw you come here. They know this shelter exists now. Even if you leave, they will investigate. They might find signs that a human lives here. They might put it together. So what will you do?" "What I always do. I will survive, and I will make sure they regret coming here." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. She was seeing the phantom now, not the tired man who wanted to be left alone. This was the person who had turned a space station into a death trap. This was the most dangerous human in the galaxy. "How many are there?" Jake asked. 15 soldiers, maybe more. They have been tracking me for weeks. This is not a small team." 15, Jake repeated. He almost smiled, though there was no humor in it. "I have handled worse odds." He pulled out a scanner and checked the perimeter around his shelter. The screen showed heat signatures moving in the distance, barely visible through the storm. "They are setting up positions," Jake said. "Surrounding the shelter. They plan to wait out the storm and then move in. Can we contact the Coalition? Call for help? By the time help arrives, we will be dead. No, we handle this ourselves." Sarah watched him work with growing amazement. This man had been living alone on a frozen moon for 5 years, but he was not unprepared. He had weapons, sensors, equipment, and plans. He had been waiting for the day his past caught up with him. "Why do the Kraith fear humans so much?" she asked. "Your species is not the strongest or the fastest. You do not have natural weapons or armor. Yet the stories about you, about all humans, they are full of fear." Jake stopped what he was doing and looked at her. "Because we do not quit," he said simply. "Every other species in the galaxy knows when to surrender. They know when a fight is hopeless. Humans do not. We will fight with our last breath, and if we are dying, we will make sure to take you with us. That is what makes us dangerous. Not strength, not speed. Just the refusal to give up." He returned to his preparations, checking weapons and planning attack routes on his scanner. Sarah realized that she had made a terrible mistake coming here. But perhaps it was also the best thing she could have done, because if anyone could protect her from the Kraith hunters, it was the Phantom of Kepler Station. Outside, the storm began to weaken. Dawn was coming. And with it, the fight that would decide whether the legend of the Phantom would grow or finally end. Dawn broke over Arctis Prime with a cold, pale light. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a landscape of ice and sharp rock formations that glittered in the weak sunlight. The temperature was still deadly, but at least the wind had stopped trying to tear everything apart. Jake stood at his window, watching the world outside through a pair of high-powered binoculars. He counted 15 heat signatures on his scanner, spread out in a rough circle around his shelter. The Kraith soldiers had positioned themselves well, covering all the obvious escape routes. They thought they had him trapped. Sarah stood beside him, looking nervous. She had slept for a few hours while Jake kept watch, and now she was alert, but clearly afraid. Her blue skin was back to its normal bright color, and she had stopped shaking from the cold. "What is your plan?" she asked. Jake lowered the binoculars and turned to face her. His expression was calm, almost relaxed. It was the look of someone who had done this many times before. "They expect us to either surrender or hide in here and wait for them to break in. They have superior numbers and firepower. By all logic, we should lose. But we are not going to lose. No, because they are thinking like soldiers. I am thinking like someone who refuses to die." He moved to his equipment locker and began distributing gear. He handed Sarah a small pistol, a thermal suit, and a communicator. "Can you use this?" he asked, indicating the weapon. "I am a scientist, not a warrior. Can you point it at someone and pull the trigger?" Sarah looked at the gun in her hands. She thought about the Kraith soldiers who had been chasing her for weeks. She thought about the evidence she carried, the proof of their crimes. She thought about all the innocent people who had died in their experiments. "Yes," she said firmly. "I can." "Good. Stay close to me and do exactly what I say. If I tell you to run, you run. If I tell you to hide, you hide. Understood?" Understood. Jake checked his own weapons, a rifle modified beyond anything the Coalition would recognize, a pistol on his hip, a knife that looked more like a tool for butchery than combat, and several devices that Sarah did not recognize at all. "What are those?" she asked, pointing to the strange devices. "Surprises. The Kraith think they know what to expect from a human with a gun. They do not know what to expect from a human with 5 years to prepare and a lot of anger to work through." He moved to the back wall of his shelter and pressed a hidden switch. A section of the floor slid open, revealing a tunnel that led down into darkness. "You dug an escape route?" "I dug 3 escape routes. This one leads to an ice cave system about a quarter-mile from here. The Kraith are watching the obvious exits. They are not watching below." They climbed down into the tunnel. It was narrow and cold, lit only by small emergency lights Jake had installed along the walls. The tunnel sloped downward for several minutes before leveling out. Then it opened into a natural ice cave, vast and echoing. Jake led Sarah through the cave system with confidence. He knew every turn, every crevice. This was his territory. He had explored these caves during his 5 years here, mapping them in case he ever needed an advantage. They emerged from a different cave entrance, far from Jake's shelter. The cold hit them immediately, but their thermal suits kept the worst of it away. Jake checked his scanner. The Kraith were still watching his shelter, unaware that their prey had already escaped. "Now what?" Sarah whispered. "Now we hunt them." Jake led her to a ridge overlooking one of the Kraith positions. 2 soldiers stood watch, their weapons ready, their eyes scanning the shelter in the distance. They were professional, alert, dangerous. They never saw Jake coming. He moved like a shadow across the ice, using the terrain to stay hidden. Sarah watched in amazement as he closed the distance without making a sound. When he was close enough, he did not use his rifle. Too loud. Instead, he used the environment. A quick cut with his knife and a support cable snapped. A chunk of ice hanging above the soldiers broke free. They looked up just in time to see tons of frozen rock falling toward them. The ice hit with a crushing impact, and the soldiers disappeared beneath it. Sarah felt sick but said nothing. They were trying to kill her. Jake was simply making sure they could not. 2 down, 13 to go, Jake said quietly as he returned to her position. They moved to the next location. This time, Jake used one of his mysterious devices. He planted it near a thermal vent that the Kraith soldiers were using for warmth. Then he and Sarah retreated to a safe distance. "Cover your ears," Jake said. The device exploded, not with fire, but with a burst of supercooled gas. The thermal vent became a fountain of liquid nitrogen, flash freezing everything in a 20-foot radius. 3 more soldiers turned into ice sculptures before they could react. The Kraith forces finally realized something was wrong. Their communications erupted with panicked voices. Sarah listened through the scanner Jake had given her, translating their battle language. "They are confused," she reported. "They cannot understand how we escaped. They are regrouping." "Good. Confused enemies make mistakes." But the Kraith commander was not panicking. His voice came over the communications, calm and controlled. He was ordering his remaining soldiers to form a tighter perimeter, to stop spreading out, to watch for traps. "Their commander is smart," Sarah said. "That is unfortunate for him. Smart enemies live just long enough to realize how badly they have lost." Jake led Sarah to a different position. This time, they were above a narrow passage between 2 ice formations. 4 Kraith soldiers were moving through it, heading toward a rally point their commander had designated. Jake pulled out a device that looked like a grenade but was not. He armed it and tossed it into the passage, then grabbed Sarah and pulled her behind cover. The device did not explode. Instead, it released a sonic pulse that resonated with the frequency of the ice formations around it. The sound was horrible, a shriek that made Sarah's teeth hurt even from behind cover. The ice formations shattered, collapsing into the passage. The 4 soldiers were buried under tons of frozen debris. Their screams cut off quickly. 9 left, Jake said. The Kraith commander was shouting orders now. His voice had lost some of its calm. He was ordering his soldiers to retreat, to fall back to their landing craft. He had finally realized the truth. They were not hunting. They were being hunted. But Jake was not done. He led Sarah on a path that would intercept the retreating soldiers. They moved quickly across the frozen landscape, using the terrain to stay hidden. Jake seemed to know exactly where the Kraith would go, as if he could read their minds. "How do you know where they will be?" Sarah asked as they ran. "Because I know how soldiers think. When things go wrong, you retreat to your strongest position. For them, that is their ship. They think if they can reach it, they will be safe." "Will they be?" Jake just smiled. It was not a nice smile. They reached a ridge overlooking the Kraith landing craft. It was a sleek military ship, heavily armed and armored. 6 soldiers were already there, trying to get the engines started. 3 more were running toward it from different directions. The commander, a tall Kraith with scars covering his scaled face, was barking orders. He kept looking around nervously, expecting an attack from any direction. Jake set up his rifle on the ridge, using a rock for support. He looked through the scope, calculating distance and wind. "I can take out the commander from here," he said, "but that would be too easy." "Too easy? They are trying to kill us. Why make it harder?" "Because I want them to deliver a message. I want them to tell other Kraith what happens when they hunt humans or their allies." Jake aimed carefully and fired. The shot hit the landing craft's fuel line, causing a small leak, not enough to stop the ship, but enough to cause problems. The Kraith commander realized the shot had come from the ridge. He pointed and shouted, and his soldiers opened fire. Energy bolts sizzled past Jake and Sarah as they dropped behind cover. "Now we run," Jake said. They sprinted down the far side of the ridge, with energy bolts exploding around them. The Kraith soldiers pursued, but they were wearing heavy armor that slowed them down. Jake and Sarah moved faster, using their knowledge of the terrain. Jake led them through a series of tight passages between ice formations. The Kraith followed, their weapons ready. They thought they had their targets cornered. Then Jake stopped running. He turned to face the pursuing soldiers, a device in his hand. "Get down," he told Sarah. She dropped flat on the ice. Jake pressed the button on his device. The ice formations on either side of the passage exploded, but not from bombs. Jake had planted charges days ago, preparing for exactly this situation. The charges had melted weak points in the ice, and now the whole structure was collapsing. The passage became a death trap. Ice fell from above, sealing off both ends. The Kraith soldiers were trapped inside, their armor too heavy to let them escape quickly. The sounds of their screams echoed through the ice, then went silent. Sarah looked at Jake with a mixture of awe and horror. This man had turned an entire frozen moon into a weapon. Every ice formation, every cave, every passage was a trap waiting to be sprung. "How long have you been planning this?" she asked. 5 years. I hoped I would never need it. But I prepared anyway because hope is not a plan. They made their way back toward the landing craft. Only the commander and 2 soldiers remained, and they were frantically trying to repair the fuel line Jake had damaged. When they saw Jake and Sarah approaching, they raised their weapons, but they did not fire. The commander held up a hand, stopping his soldiers. "You are the Phantom," the commander said in perfect human standard language. His voice was rough but clear. "I am just a man," Jake replied, "a man who wants to be left alone. You killed 13 of my soldiers. They should not have come here. They should not have hunted an innocent scientist. They should not have disturbed me." The Kraith commander looked at Jake for a long moment. Then he looked at his remaining 2 soldiers, then back at the damaged ship. "What now?" he asked. "You kill us too?" "No," Jake said. "Now you leave. You take your ship and you go back to Kraith space, and you tell them what happened here." The commander's eyes narrowed. "Why would you let us live?" "Because I want you to spread the word. The Phantom could have killed all of you, but he chose mercy this time. Tell your commanders. Your war chiefs, your leaders. Tell them to leave humanity and its allies alone. This is your only warning." The Kraith commander stared at Jake Morrison with eyes full of hatred and something else. Fear. Real, genuine fear. This human had destroyed most of his team using nothing but the environment and cleverness. No massive weapons, no advanced technology, just a deep understanding of the terrain and a refusal to be beaten. "Why should I believe you will let us go?" the commander asked. His name was Vex, according to the identification marks on his armor. He was a veteran, decorated multiple times for service to the Kraith Dominion. He had fought against the Thorian battle breeds and won. He had led successful campaigns against 3 different species, and now he had been defeated by a single human on a frozen moon. "Because if I wanted you dead, you would already be dead," Jake said simply. He kept his rifle pointed at the ground, not threatening, but ready. "I had a dozen chances to kill you from a distance. I chose not to take them." Vex looked around at the frozen wasteland. His soldiers were gone, buried under ice, frozen solid, crushed by falling rocks. This place had become a graveyard for his team, and the only reason he was still alive was because this human had decided to spare him. "At Kepler Station, you showed no mercy," Vex said. "You killed 200 of our finest warriors. You turned that station into a tomb. Why show mercy now?" Jake was quiet for a moment. His eyes were distant, remembering things he wished he could forget. "At Kepler Station, I had nothing left to lose," he said finally. I watched your people murder innocent families. I watched them kill children. Something in me broke that day. I became the Phantom because the man I was before died with those families." He looked at Sarah, standing beside him with the pistol in her hands. "But she reminded me that there are still people worth protecting. Your hunt for her, your war crimes, your experiments on innocent populations. That needs to stop. So I am giving you a chance. Take it and go home, or refuse it and die here." Vex clenched his jaw. Every instinct told him to fight, to refuse this offer, to die with honor rather than accept mercy from a human. But he also knew the truth. He was beaten. His soldiers were dead. His mission had failed, and most importantly, he had information that his superiors needed to hear. The Phantom was real. The Phantom was alive. And the Phantom was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. "I accept," Vex said finally. The words tasted like poison, but he forced them out. "We will leave." "Good. But first you will give me your communication logs. All of them. I want every message, every report, every piece of data you collected while hunting Sarah. That is classified military information. And it is also evidence of your war crimes. Give it to me or stay here forever." Vex hesitated, then nodded to one of his remaining soldiers. The soldier removed a data chip from his armor and handed it to Jake. Jake took it and gave it to Sarah, who secured it with her own evidence. "Now leave," Jake said, "and remember what I told you. This is your only warning." Vex and his two soldiers climbed into their landing craft. The engines fired up with a high whine, struggling with the damaged fuel line but still functional. The ship lifted off the ice, sending a blast of hot exhaust that melted the ground beneath it. Jake and Sarah watched it rise into the pale sky, growing smaller and smaller until it was just a dot, then nothing at all. Sarah let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Her hands were shaking. The adrenaline that had kept her going through the fight was fading, leaving her exhausted and scared. "It is over," she said. "For now," Jake replied. "But they will tell others. The Phantom is active again. That will bring attention I do not want. You could have killed them all. No witnesses, no one to spread the word. Then their superiors would send another team to find out what happened, and another after that. This way, they know the cost of coming here. They know I am willing to fight. Maybe that will make them think twice." They walked back toward Jake's shelter in silence. The sun was higher now, though it gave little warmth. The ice glittered all around them, beautiful and deadly. This was a harsh world, but it was Jake's world. He had made it his home. When they reached the shelter, Jake began the work of cleaning up and resetting his traps. The tunnel entrance was still hidden. The defenses were still in place. But he would need to improve them. If more Kraith came, they would come better prepared. Sarah sat by the fire, warming herself and thinking about everything that had happened. She had come to this moon by accident, running from hunters, seeking only shelter from a storm. Instead, she had found the most wanted human in the galaxy, and he had saved her life. "Why do they fear humans so much?" she asked suddenly. It was a question that had been bothering her since the fight. "The Kraith are bigger, stronger, better armed. They have conquered dozens of worlds. Yet they are terrified of your species." Jake sat down across from her, accepting a cup of hot coffee she had prepared. "Because we are different," he said. "Most species in the galaxy evolved on worlds with dangerous predators. They learned to be strong, fast, armored. They learned to fight or to run. But humans evolved on a world where we were the prey. I do not understand. How does being prey make you dangerous? Because we learned to be stubborn. We learned that you do not have to be the strongest to survive. You just have to refuse to die. Our ancestors were hunted by creatures that were bigger, faster, stronger. Creatures with claws and teeth and natural weapons. We had nothing but our brains and our refusal to give up. He took a sip of his coffee, organizing his thoughts. We learned to make tools. We learned to set traps. We learned to turn the environment into a weapon. And most importantly, we learned that if you hunt a human and fail to kill them, they will hunt you back. We do not forgive. We do not forget. We hold grudges for generations. Sarah thought about this. It explained so much about what she had witnessed. Jake had not won because he was stronger than the Kraith. He had won because he was willing to use everything around him as a weapon. He had turned the entire moon into a trap. At Kepler Station, she said carefully, you were alone against 300 soldiers. How did you survive those 3 days? Jake's expression darkened. This was clearly painful for him to talk about, but he answered anyway. The first day I was just trying to stay alive. I hid in the access tunnels, moving through the walls and floors where the Kraith could not follow. They were too big, too heavily armored, but I could fit through maintenance shafts and ventilation systems. That does not explain how you killed so many of them. The second day I realized no one was coming to save us. The coalition ships were too far away. Everyone on that station was going to die unless I did something impossible. So I stopped trying to survive and started trying to win. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the frozen landscape. The station was my home. I knew every system, every backup protocol, every override code. I had been hired to improve security, which meant I knew all the weaknesses. I turned those weaknesses into weapons. You used the station's own systems against them. I used everything. Gravity plating became crushing traps. Airlocks became execution chambers. Life support became a way to poison entire sections. The Kraith were fighting against a ghost they could not see, in an environment that was actively trying to kill them. Were you not afraid? Jake turned to look at her. His eyes were hard. I was terrified every single moment. But fear does not matter. What matters is what you do despite the fear. The Kraith expected me to hide or surrender. They expected me to be rational and accept that I was outnumbered. But humans are not always rational when we are angry. He returned to his seat by the fire. The third day was the worst. I had killed maybe 150 of them by then. The rest were hunting me seriously, using proper tactics, being careful. But I had spent 2 days learning their patterns, understanding how they moved, how they thought. And you killed them all. Not all. 50 escaped when the coalition ships finally arrived. But I made sure they would never forget what happened at Kepler Station. I made sure they would tell the story. I wanted every Kraith soldier in the galaxy to know that humans do not go quietly, that we fight back with everything we have, even when it seems hopeless. Sarah was quiet for a long time, processing this. She had grown up with stories of human persistence, but hearing it from Jake himself made it real in a way that legends never could. You carry a heavy burden, she said finally. 200 lives, even enemy lives. That is a lot of death for one person to cause. It is. And I think about them every day. I wonder if some of them had families. If some of them were good people following bad orders. But then I remember the families they killed at Kepler, the children they murdered. And I know I would do it all again if I had to. Is that why you came here? To get away from who you became? I came here because I was afraid of what I might become if I stayed. After Kepler, people wanted to make me a hero. They wanted me to join the coalition military, to train others, to become a symbol. But I did not feel like a hero. I felt like a weapon, and weapons should be locked away when they are not needed. Outside, the wind was picking up again. Another storm was coming, though not as bad as the one that had brought Sarah to his door. The sky was darkening with ice clouds. What will you do now? Sarah asked. Vex will report what happened here. Others will come looking for you. Maybe. Or maybe they will decide it is not worth the cost. Either way, I will be ready. And me? What should I do? Jake pulled out a communicator from his equipment locker and handed it to her. You contact the coalition. You give them the evidence you collected about the Kraith war crimes. You make sure those responsible are brought to justice. Will you come with me? Help me present the evidence? No. My part in this is done. But you have everything you need. The data chip from Vex will support your findings. That is more than enough to start an investigation. Sarah took the communicator but did not activate it yet. She looked at Jake, this legend who wanted only to be left alone. "Thank you," she said, "for saving my life, for protecting me, for showing mercy to Vex so that the evidence could leave this place. You do not need to thank me. Just make sure their crimes do not go unpunished. Make sure the people they hurt get justice." "I will. I promise." A beeping sound came from Jake's scanner. He checked it and frowned. "Your rescue ship will be here in 6 hours. The storm will have passed by then. You should prepare to leave." The rescue ship appeared in the sky exactly 6 hours later, just as Jake had predicted. It was a coalition science vessel, small and fast, the kind used for emergency extractions. Sarah had contacted them using the communicator Jake provided, and they had come immediately when they heard who she was and what evidence she carried. Jake stood outside his shelter, watching the ship descend. The engines kicked up clouds of ice crystals that sparkled in the pale sunlight. The ship landed smoothly about 50 yards away, and the boarding ramp extended with a hiss of hydraulics. 3 figures emerged. 2 were armed security officers, their weapons ready but not raised. The third was a Valerian male, older than Sarah, wearing the insignia of a senior scientist. His face lit up when he saw her. "Sarah!" he called out, rushing forward. "Thank the ancestors you are alive. When we lost contact with you 3 weeks ago, we feared the worst." Sarah embraced him briefly. "I am fine, Professor Kent. Thanks to him." She gestured to Jake, who stood a respectful distance away. The professor and the security officers turned to look at the human. Their reactions were similar to Sarah's had been. Recognition followed by shock, followed by fear. "You," the professor whispered. "You are the Phantom of Kepler Station." Jake said nothing. He just waited, hands visible and empty of weapons. He was giving them a choice: trust him or treat him as a threat. The security officers raised their weapons slightly, uncertain. One of them spoke into his communicator, probably reporting the situation to someone higher up the chain of command. "Lower your weapons," Sarah said sharply. "He saved my life. He protected me from the Kraith hunters. He gave me evidence that will prove their war crimes." "But he is wanted by the Kraith," one of the security officers said. "The bounty on his head is enormous. If they find out we had contact with him and did not report it—" "Then you will tell them the truth," Jake interrupted. "That I helped a coalition scientist escape from illegal hunters. That I provided evidence of Kraith war crimes. That I showed mercy to their soldiers when I could have killed them all." The professor studied Jake carefully. He was a scientist, trained to observe and analyze. What he saw was not the monster from the stories. He saw a tired man who wanted to be left alone. "What do you want from us?" the professor asked. "Nothing. Just take Sarah and the evidence and leave. Forget I was here." "We cannot do that. The coalition will want to know how Sarah escaped. They will want to interview you, to understand what happened." "Then tell them a human helped her. Do not tell them which human. There are billions of us in the galaxy." The professor and the security officers exchanged glances. They were clearly uncomfortable with this situation. On one hand, Jake had helped a coalition scientist. On the other hand, he was a controversial figure with a massive bounty on his head. Sarah stepped forward, holding up the data chips that contained all the evidence. "Listen to me carefully," she said. "This evidence proves that the Kraith Dominion has been conducting illegal biological weapons testing on civilian populations. Thousands have died. Thousands more are suffering. This needs to be brought to the coalition immediately." "Of course," the professor agreed. "That is why we came for you. Then take it and go. Stop wasting time questioning a man who risked his life to protect me. If you want to repay him, the best thing you can do is leave him alone." The professor nodded slowly. He understood. Jake Morrison wanted no part of galactic politics or fame. He wanted only to be forgotten. "Very well," the professor said. "We will report that you were helped by a local resident, identity unknown. The coalition will not press the issue if the evidence is solid." "Thank you," Sarah said. She turned to Jake. "Will you be all right here, alone again?" "I will be fine. This is my home. The Kraith may come looking for you after Vex delivers his report. Let them come. I will be ready." Sarah wanted to say more, to convince him to leave this frozen moon and return to civilization, but she could see in his eyes that he had made his choice. This isolation was his penance, his way of dealing with what he had done at Kepler Station. "If you ever need help," she said, "contact me. I owe you my life." "You owe me nothing. Just make sure the evidence reaches the right people. Make sure the victims get justice." Sarah nodded and reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small communicator, specially encrypted. "Take this anyway. It has my personal contact information. If you ever change your mind, if you ever want to talk or need assistance, use it." Jake hesitated, then accepted the communicator. He pocketed it without comment. The security officers were getting nervous, wanting to leave before more complications arose. The professor gently guided Sarah toward the ship. "We should go," he said. "The Coalition Council is waiting to hear your report." Sarah walked toward the ship but kept looking back at Jake. This human had become a legend through violence. But he had shown her something else. He had shown her that even the most dangerous person could choose mercy. That even someone who had caused so much death could still protect life. She boarded the ship with the others. The ramp retracted and the engines fired up. Jake stepped back, shielding his eyes from the ice crystals kicked up by the exhaust. The ship lifted off smoothly, rising into the pale sky. Jake watched it go, growing smaller and smaller until it was just a dot, then nothing at all. Silence returned to Arctis Prime. The wind blew across the frozen landscape. The sun hung low in the sky, providing little warmth. Everything was exactly as it had been before Sarah arrived. Jake turned and walked back to his shelter. There was work to do. His traps needed to be reset. His weapons needed to be cleaned and stored. The tunnel entrance needed to be sealed again. He had to prepare in case more visitors came, whether they were Kraith hunters or Coalition officials. But as he worked, he found himself thinking about Sarah's words, about justice for the victims, about the evidence she carried. Maybe his actions here would prevent future deaths. Maybe by protecting one scientist, he had helped save thousands of lives. It was not redemption. He did not believe he deserved that. But it was something. A reminder that he was still human, still capable of protecting instead of just destroying. That night, Jake sat by his fire as he always did. But this time, he looked at the communicator Sarah had given him. He did not activate it. He did not plan to use it. But knowing it was there, knowing that someone in the galaxy saw him as more than just the Phantom, that meant something. The following weeks passed quietly. The storms came and went. Jake maintained his shelter and explored the ice caves. He read his books and kept to his routine. But he also monitored galactic news feeds, something he had not done in years. The evidence Sarah provided caused a massive scandal. The Coalition formally condemned the Kraith Dominion for war crimes. Several high-ranking Kraith officials were arrested. Sanctions were imposed. It was not perfect justice, but it was a start. Sarah appeared in several news reports, speaking about the biological weapons testing and the need for stronger enforcement of galactic laws. She never mentioned Jake by name, but she did mention that a brave individual had protected her when she needed it most. The reports about the Phantom also changed. New stories emerged about how he had shown mercy to Kraith soldiers, how he had let them live to deliver a message. Some saw this as weakness, others saw it as growth. The legend was evolving, becoming more complex than just a tale of violence. Jake watched these reports with mixed feelings. He was glad the evidence had made a difference. He was glad Sarah was safe. But he also knew that his brief return to action had reminded the galaxy that the Phantom existed. 2 months after Sarah left, Jake's long-range scanner detected an incoming ship. His hand moved to his rifle automatically, but then he checked the identification beacon and relaxed slightly. It was a coalition diplomatic vessel, unarmed and broadcasting peaceful intentions. They were requesting permission to land and speak with the resident of this location. Jake considered ignoring them, but curiosity got the better of him. He activated his communicator. "This is a private residence. State your business." The response came quickly. "Mr. Morrison, we come with a message from the Coalition Council. We mean no harm. We simply wish to speak with you." Jake thought about it for a long moment. Then he made his decision. "You can land, but only one person leaves the ship, and they come unarmed." "Understood. Thank you." The ship landed smoothly. The boarding ramp extended and a single figure emerged. It was an older human woman, gray-haired and dignified, wearing the formal robes of a coalition ambassador. She walked toward Jake's shelter slowly, her hands visible and empty. When she was close enough, Jake opened his door and stepped outside. "Mr. Morrison," she said formally, "my name is Ambassador Linda Hayes. I bring a message from the Coalition Council." "I am not interested in medals or ceremonies," Jake said flatly. "I know. That is not why I am here." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "The Coalition wants to thank you for protecting Dr. Sarah and helping to expose the Kraith war crimes. Your actions have saved countless lives." "I did what needed to be done." "Yes, you did. And the Council wants you to know that your actions at Kepler Station have been reviewed in light of new information. The full details of what the Kraith did to those civilians, the executions you witnessed, have been declassified. The Coalition formally acknowledges that you acted in defense of innocent lives." Jake felt something twist in his chest. Validation, recognition, things he had told himself he did not need. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means the Coalition is officially clearing your record. You are no longer considered a controversial figure. The Kraith bounty still exists, but the Coalition will provide protection if you choose to return to civilized space." "I do not want protection. I want to be left alone." Ambassador Hayes nodded. "I understand. But the offer stands. Should you ever change your mind." She reached into her robe and pulled out a small case. "This is for you, a token of appreciation from Dr. Sarah and the thousands of lives you helped save." Jake took the case and opened it. Inside was a medal, simple and understated. It bore the Coalition insignia and a single word engraved on the back: Guardian. "Sarah chose that word herself," the ambassador explained. "She said you are not a phantom or a weapon. You are a guardian who protects those who cannot protect themselves." Jake stared at the medal for a long time. Then he closed the case and looked at the ambassador. "Tell her thank you, and tell her I am glad she is safe." "I will. Is there anything else you need? Anything the Coalition can provide?" "No, just leave me in peace." Ambassador Hayes bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. Then she returned to her ship. Jake watched it take off and disappear into the sky. He went back inside his shelter and looked at the medal again. Guardian. It was a better legacy than Phantom, a better way to be remembered. He placed the medal on a shelf where he could see it from his chair by the fire. It would stay there, a reminder that even in his darkest moments, even when he had become something terrible, he had still been protecting people. The galaxy had not forgotten the Phantom of Kepler Station, but now They also remembered the Guardian who had shown mercy on Arctis Prime. The legend had changed, softened, become more human, and Jake Morrison, alone on his frozen moon, finally felt something he had not felt in 7 long years. Peace. He knew it would not last forever. Trouble had a way of finding him no matter how far he ran. But for now, in this moment, he could sit by his fire and be content. Because he had proven something important, not just to the galaxy, but to himself. He could choose when to fight and when to show mercy. He was not just a weapon to be locked away. He was a person who could still make a difference when it mattered. And if the galaxy needed the Phantom again, he would be ready. But until then, Jake Morrison would simply be a man living quietly on a frozen moon, reading his books, tending his fire, and finding peace in solitude. Because that was what humans did best. They survived, they adapted, they protected what mattered, and they never, ever gave up.